Hi everyone. Please forgive me for being a little bit late. So it's very nice to be here again for this Ask Me Anything Nunchat live. So we have a few less questions this week. So all the people that usually message me on a one-on-one basis, perhaps you can now direct your questions to these events, which are every 2 or 3 weeks. You can just message me and say you want to be part of our WhatsApp community, and you can stay in touch with the updates. Anyway, so perhaps we can just start with a little bit of meditation, just calming the mind, coming back to being present. Just be aware of your breath coming in and out of your nose. Is your breath deep or shallow, fast or slow? And just feel that good energy flowing through you, a sense of unconditional love and warmth for yourself. May I be well, may I be happy, may I be peaceful and at ease, filled with loving kindness and compassion. May the day be well and the night be well. May the midday hour bring happiness too. In every minute and every second, may the day and night be well. By the blessings of the triple gem, may all things be protected and safe. May all beings born in each of the 4 ways live in a land of purity and attain the bodhisattva stages. The countenance of the world-honored one, like the full moon or like the orb of the sun, shines with the light of clarity, a halo of wisdom, joy and equanimity. Namo Shakyamunaya Buddhaya. Okay, so I don't have so many questions this week, so if you have a question, feel free to write it in the comments. But we can start with when we face obstacles in life or question our own decision-making and motivation, how can we practice? Can dakinis interrupt this self-doubt and obstacles and help liberate us? Of course, enlightenment is a long process, but it's definitely possible to lighten up our mind and not grasp so strongly at, to everything. Basically, we take ourselves way too seriously. Everything is like, oh my God. And we obsess about everything. So it's natural for things to ebb and flow because everything is impermanent. And it's important to know everything is impermanent. You feel bad today, you doubt yourself today, you may not tomorrow. So the way to ride these waves, these ups and downs, is equanimity. So equanimity is not feeling or apathy, but it's like when you zoom back and you have a bigger picture. I was chatting with my sister the other day, and she said that she went up on the roof of a pub and she could see the whole neighborhood where she lives, where she's spent years and years living, and she's never seen it like that before. Like all these lives, all these complex problems, these personalities. And she just looked at it from a high place and she saw, wow, she just got a different perspective, a more spacious view, And if you understand, okay, today my partner's having a bad day, but I don't have to take their bad mood personally, and I don't have to pick faults when I know it's the worst point to do that. They need a bit of space and they're having a hard time. And it's okay for them to feel what they feel. It's okay to have a bad day sometimes. But if we step in dog poo, we don't start rubbing it all over our face, making it worse, going, oh my God. We step over it, and we clean our shoe and we keep walking, isn't it? But, if it's a significant emotional issue, like past trauma, grief, we might need therapy. We might need to learn, read some books, learn some ways, learn some tools to make the unconscious conscious. We might need to start working on our emotional intelligence or our reactivity or our communication skills, if something keeps manifesting again and again. But the equanimity is just understanding this too shall pass, not making a permanent decision for a temporary problem. And the way we develop equanimity is having a stable mind, having a daily meditation practice, but also understanding that being reactive, being volatile is suffering. Having an uncontrolled mind is suffering. We cling so tightly to friends, but friends were once strangers, and sometimes friends become strangers again. Like people change. People are in, friend, enemy, and stranger are just a random label we give to people according to how they make us feel. It can't be their absolute nature, because even if there's someone we really don't like, there's probably, someone they go to at night who thinks that they're a wonderful person, someone who loves them. Maybe a little kid who puts their arm around their neck and goes, oh, I'm so glad you're home. Okay, but in terms of being a disruptor, in terms of the Dakini and how they cut off obstacles to our practice and bring blessings, they can interrupt. They can definitely interrupt self-doubt, because they cut through with primordial wisdom. And they say, look at what you're doing. You're self-grasping again. You're taking, what is self-grasping? We don't mean like, of course you need to take care of your mind and body and be kind to yourself without being narcissistic. But the body, the self in Buddhism is a relative construct. And even though we need to deal with the self and we need to take care of our emotions and have compassion and boundaries and so forth, we basically grasp at a permanent self on an impermanent pile of non-self elements. And it is this mistaken view of this grasping at a permanent self as separate from all of creation, all of heaven and earth, that creates suffering and karma and keeps us trapped in samsara, this dualistic vision of self and other. Instead of seeing, a table was once a tree, a table contains water, sun, the elements of those things, logger's lunch, the history of furniture, all of those things, all of those non-table elements make the table. And if we light a match on the table, it will become firewood. It won't be a table anymore. So everything is in this net of interbeing. Everything is empty of a permanent, unchanging self, full of all of heaven and earth. Yeah. But a table relatively still functions as a table. A self, a mind-body continuum, still functions as a self. But the difference is how we view it, how we see, whether we see ourselves as a dependent arising that is constantly changing, because we're not the same person we were yesterday or when we were 5, but there is continuity. Like a river, you can never put your foot in the same river twice, and yet the Ganga has the same name from Gangotri in the Himalayas down to the ocean. But it's this holding on as, not really seeing it as moment to moment discrete awareness and moment to moment energy in a field of revelation, changing, moving energy. We just see it as a static, concrete thing. And it is, it's kind of like trying to pin down waves on the ocean, Instead of just enjoying the waves arise, abide, and dissolve, we try to pin it down, and that's when we suffer, because that's not the nature of how things are. Of course, we don't want to be dismissive, like, oh, it doesn't matter because everything's impermanent. But in terms of how Dakinis interrupt this, cut off obstacles and help liberate us, they perform the 4 activities of enlightened Dakinis. We're talking about female enlightened semi-wrathful wisdom beings. They could be a meditational deity. They could be a protector of the Dharma. They could be a woman who has done a deep amount of practice. But they'll shock you out of your overthinking. And that's why we say mantras. Like, we bring our mind. We've gone off and we're obsessing about something that happened to us 20 years ago. Oh yeah, I meant to be saying mantras. We're returning to the inner wisdom being. We're placing our mind on that object instead of the outer obsessing, thinking. And when we meditate, we create a little, it's like we've been living under clouds for a long time, and we create a little bit of blue sky, a little bit of spaciousness, a little bit of freedom. And gradually that freedom, which is what that spacious wisdom that Dakinis represent, open up, So that's what the Dakini does as a meditational deity. But they perform the activities in Vajrayana of peaceful, wrathful, increasing, magnetizing, action, and so the wisdom of peace, the white deities, the peaceful deities, soothe anger, calm the flames. The wrathful activity of enlightened beings subdues delusion and cuts off self-grasping. It's like, stop. It's like when it's not coming from a place of ego. It's like when a child runs out on the road and the mother grabs it and says, come back here. It's to save the child's life, right? So this is what the wrathful beings do. If beings can't be woken up any other way, the Buddhas, the awakened beings, will try to stop, wake up. A wrathful thing might be putting a abusive domestic violence perpetrator in jail. No, that's not okay. Stop. But it could also just be like, there's stories of Dakinis who appeared before monks, and these monks were like high caste, really prideful monks, and these dakinis would like, you know, maybe offer them a meal of meat, or be extremely seductive, like, and then turn from a beautiful, seductive deity into a terrifying, wrathful demoness. You know, just to kind of show them the impermanence and the facade of their own pride and delusion. You know, like maybe even like an old peasant lady who appears before them and says, you know, you might have studied every word the Buddha ever said, but are you liberated? Are you still just full of pride? Haven't you just built another spiritual ego? Don't you think it's time you really woke up? And maybe then they just cut off the top of their head and gone like this, or, you know, just something really unconventional, but bringing them back to cutting through their intellectual subterfuge and being like, now wake up, you know, bringing them back that way to the unconditioned, open, primordial wisdom, which can sometimes be shocking. Like if you've almost had a car accident, you've almost been hit by a car, or you know, if you've had some kind of near-death experience, there's this kind of, just as you're about to, or you've lost every, you know, you've come home one day and your partner's gone, I've cheated on you and I want a divorce, and there's this moment of like where you're falling, and there's just this open, shocked, vivid, pure awareness. That is the kind of, that stops our thoughts, you know, that kind of vividness before we react. That openness, that shock, can be a moment that shocks us back into pure awareness, pure wisdom. So part of why dakinis are sometimes naked or have fangs, or, you know, carry strange like axes and hooks and hammers, and, you know, or maybe they have the head of an animal. It's to make you understand that the truth of your basic wisdom is very, it's to show you that the nice little, you know, suburban lawns and manicured white fence, picket fence ideas, the ordered things of your mind, how you've got yourself set out, like I'm this, I'm a woman, I'm 45, I've got this job, you know, I had this childhood. It's just a construct. It's not who you really are. So, you know, they're there to show you that intellectual knowledge is limited compared to the wild shock of your wild, free, non-conceptual nature, basically. And all of those hooks and knives and whatever they're carrying are to cut through this delusion, basically. So they're basically just like, wake the F up. Yeah. Like in Dzogchen, you know, it would be like, bah! You know, of course you don't do that in public. You do it when you study more to understand how that could work. But you're returning to the present moment in a very vivid, uncontrived way. You're letting the storyline drop, you know, because just sitting with our thoughts, you could see it during COVID perfectly, how people make themselves crazy with overthinking, you know, how we create this identity and we defend ourselves, how people argue with each other online, myself included sometimes, you know, and speak up for the vulnerable. But sometimes you see people arguing about stupid things or just being really unkind, trolling each other. And it's such a waste of time, but you can be sure that if someone is very harshly judging others, sorry, my internet is having a slow time. You can hear people's inner voice in the way that they troll and talk to others. So I can see, on my Facebook feed as a feminist, as an activist, although that's not my main work these days, just saying something about inequality or racism or women in Buddhism, you'll get a whole bunch of men who are like, not this, not true, we don't like you. Very unkind, And of course, there's a lot of men who are very lovely and very encouraging. Some women are also, how dare you poke my holy cow. But you can see that's their inner voice. There's a lot of shame and judgmentalness, and that's something patriarchy reinforces in men. That's how they keep them in line. Shame, and so that the harsh way they speak to others is the harsh way they speak to themselves. Be a man, pull yourself together. Don't be weak. Gosh, it must be hard and suffocating to carry this identity, this imposed identity. So I hope that answers how dakinis can be, how they can be disruptors of delusion, disruptors of false self-identification, untruth. But these 4 activities, peaceful, wrathful, magnetizing is it's red, it's transforming desire, it's bringing good conditions onto the path and attracting beings onto the path. So some deities are very calm and they're so beautiful and attractive, and seductive. And that's how they attract people onto the path. And as soon as they've attracted them, then they're like cutting off the ego. You'll see some teachers, they do that. They attract people onto the path and they're very nice. I mean, I'm talking about the non-abusive ones, the good ones, but they're still sometimes not giving you an easy time. They bring you in and then they're like, once they've established trust with you, then they'll go into that weak, painful, unresolved spot and they'll go, there it is. That's what you need to work on. And you'll be like, please don't do that. Please don't do that. But they'll very kindly show you this needs to be worked on. And you need months and years to develop a relationship with a teacher you can trust like that. Yeah. And then there's increasing, which is yellow. So increasing abundance, increasing the resources you need to practice Dharma, increasing realization, increasing merit, which overcomes miserliness and pride. And then there's, the wisdom of action, which overcomes jealousy. Instead of being jealous of others, green, removing obstacles. You understand, how do they do that? How can I do that? How can I create auspicious circumstances to achieve what I want to achieve instead of resenting others' success? So the wisdom of peaceful, wrathful, increasing, magnetizing. Yeah, I think that's it. Action. Peaceful, wrathful, action, increasing, magnetizing. 5 activities. This is in the field of awareness how bodhisattvas and dakinis, saints, enlightened beings, awakened beings, interact with unenlightened beings to try and bring them onto the path and accomplish enlightened activities in the world. Yeah. And dakinis, enlightened dakinis can manifest on many different levels, like as human beings, as deities, bodies of light. So they're not just manifesting on one level, and they carry the blessings of the lineage as well. They can remove obstacles in the environment and so forth. I apologize for my my internet. Anyway, okay, so second question. Why are singing, dancing, music to be avoided? Is it related to energy or excitement? But Buddhist practice does involve voice movement. So what's going on there? What's the story there? So for lay people or householders, singing, dancing, and music are okay. It's for monastics that they're not okay. But we do have sacred chants. We do have sacred music. And we do have Lama dances. So if you look at what happens with singing and dancing, quite often it's about being seductive, attracting a partner, or, you know, more self-clinging, basically. So if we're moving in a sacred way, we're trying to embody a particular energy, tell the story of an enlightened being, remove obstacles, give blessings, move with mindfulness, with presence. Like, for example, the way Sufis dance, I would say that is a deeply spiritual, sacred art. And I wouldn't call that increasing attachment. So in Mahayana, you'll often see there is more arts in the monastics. You know, they do ink painting. They do, you know, they chant with a bell. They do sacred movements. They do Tai Chi. So it's about, the difference is one is leading to peace and equanimity and giving blessing and creating this sacred environment of awareness. And the other is all about, you know, self-clinging and trying to sexually attract someone, which is fine. It's just not suitable to the life of a celibate monk or a nun. But one is with awareness. One is increasing sacred awareness and deep peace and watering, you know, slowing down so people can see their own mind and their own nature. And one is about excitation and seduction and look at me and more, you know, more self-grasping, actually. That's the difference. And that's why, you know, in the Vinaya, monks and nuns don't wear lay clothes. They don't wear makeup. They don't try to attract others. They're looking inward to uncover their true beauty inwardly. Yes. But I have to say, Christians have much better music than Buddhists. Even Hindus. Buddhists could use with some better music, I think. Some better sacred music. Yes. And I think having a healthy body, you know, doing things like Tai Chi, Qigong, the Tibetans have this special yoga that they do for retreat, but that's not something that is for non-yogis. That's not just something you do every day. I think the asana of Hindu yoga can be really useful as a daily practice to precede meditation. You know, having a healthy body, having the energy flowing through your body, taking care of your body as you age is a really good thing, because you want to have your body, speech, and mind in a good state to develop your spiritual practice, use this precious human rebirth, get enlightened, but also, you know, do some social service. So good health, self-care is also part of serving others and having your energy flow well through your body and so forth. Yeah. Okay, so someone asked another question. In meditation, when we are being aware or looking at something in the present moment, should we just look at it without analyzing too much and move on? Or should we have curiosity and try to understand it in detail? So if you're doing a calm abiding meditation with mindfulness, you don't want to get carried away by your thoughts and feelings. You're fixating on your thoughts and feelings all day long. So you just notice, okay, there's a thought, there's a feeling, and return to the breath, return to the mantra, the visualization, whatever you're doing. But there are meditations where you might go, wow, there's a thought. What is the nature of this thought? What is the origin of this thought? Where is this me that is having these thoughts? Is it in my bones? Is it in my flesh? Is it in my skin? Is it in my eyes? Is it in my bones? You know, so there will be times where you might do a intellectual contemplation, for example, on death and impermanence, or karma, or bodhicitta, compassion, great compassion. But generally in meditation, you don't want to be taking everything apart and overthinking. You want to, you know, return to the objective meditation and not be carried away by the conceptual mind. Yeah. Okay, so because I wrote this way back in February when I came, but I didn't post it. Okay, sorry, I'm reading Michelle's comment. It's rather long. I am a solitary lay Buddhist. Oh, hang on. Oh no, where did it go? Can we call on dakinis? Hang on. Sorry, I have a lot of questions here, but you can write a question, by the way. Can we call on dakinis to keep us moving when we slip into self-concepts? I hope I answered that question. Yes, you can. You can say Om Tare Tu Tare Ture Swaha. You can invoke the 21 verses of praise to Tara. That's part of why we do devotional practice. You can find that. You can Google praises, 21 praises to Tara, or the short praise, which is Om Jetsunma Pamadram. The mantra is Om Tare Tu Tare Ture Soha. Imagine Tara in front of you and all this green light flowing through your body. That's a very good thing, all these devotional practices. Or the one verse, the 7-line prayer to Tara, which you can find in Tibetan or English. There is, the FPMT has a really nice chantable version to the 21 Taras. It's quite an involved practice, but I think it's quite powerful. It's a good place to start. And as you go further, you know, the Khandro Tuktik, the praises of dakinis, maybe I can post that in our WhatsApp group. That is a really involved, it's something you can read, but if you really want to do the practice, it's a very involved kind of, it's got a preliminary practices of prostrations and then praises to the dakinis and so forth. And then there's a deity like Red Vajrayogini, or if you're in the Nyingma tradition, the Krodakali, the Tromonakmo, the black dakini. So there's all kinds of amazing. I don't know if I turn my phone around, you can see I have this really beautiful dakini in my shrine. Can you see her there? She's dancing. And there's a small one. But anyway, they're so beautiful. It's so nice to have female deities as well as male deities, right? Ultimately, they're all just made of light. They're not gods. They're just embodiments of wisdom that we ourselves can become. I think that's one of the beautiful things about Tibetan Buddhism. They have this rich collection of different deities, different embodiments. You know, it's so visually, it brings in all your senses, sound, sight, thought, physical. It really, it's transforming all your thoughts and feelings. And that's the idea of, that's the premise of Vajrayana, that the deity that you're meditating on is just the mirror of your own mind. And eventually you realize you and the deity are one. The luminous beauty and pure awareness, magnificence of the deity is your own mind's primordial wisdom beyond birth and death, beyond gender, and so forth. Yes. Okay, I got distracted. I was reading someone else's questions? Okay. Keeps disappearing. Sorry. I follow the Dalai Lama and hold. I have unshakable confidence in the Dharma. Okay, I'm summarizing here. I was at awe and saddened by the truths that Aya has spoken about in her feed. I've personally investigated or experienced in various ways. Oh my goodness. I recognized long ago that there is gender inequality. She's born in a Southeast Asian country and migrated. Aya has lived at the coalface, meaning I think patriarchy in Buddhism, and she's seen the material comforts that a privileged life in the West can offer. The truth about the unequal treatment of nuns and women in religion has existed since ancient times, exacerbated by religions that persist to entrench feudal, hierarchical, and patriarchal practices and systems. The Dharma doesn't teach sorry, it's a really long thing. Anyway, you can see Michelle Stevenson's comment here on my feed. Okay, we should not just accept and disregard rumors of abuse or scandals by gurus, lamas, and rinpoches. We should address them. It's healthy to talk about those things. Thank you for that. She appreciates that I spoke out about the New Kadampa tradition in Buddhism, which is actually, I mean, they do teach Buddhism, but they bring people into this practice of a deity called Dorji Shugden that is attacking other traditions, and it's not an enlightened deity, it's a wrathful Dharma protector, but it's only protecting the Gelug school. So it creates a lot of, it's like a demon that gives cities, but does a lot of harm. And they emphasize this as a deity, which is problematic. And they don't, read any books other than the teachings of Geshe Khalsang. So it's very enclosed. And if anyone speaks out about sectarianism or anything, they're, shunned. Thank you for your kind words, Michelle. Yes, there is feudal, hierarchical, patriarchal practices and systems. The Dharma doesn't teach all these. It's man-made. I agree. That's what makes me sad, that people in Western countries choose to perpetuate these wrong acts. Yep, I'm totally with you there. Thank you for your kind support. Okay, ADHD, are certain medications more effective and beneficial? I have no idea. I don't take medication. I have ADHD, I think. But you would need to speak to maybe a psychiatrist or a GP, a general practitioner of medicine first. I'm not qualified to comment on that. Yeah. So does anyone else have any questions? Okay, so I thought I'd speak about, feel free to write a question at any time, but I thought I would speak about the shadow side, embracing the shadow in psychology, because I had some experiences this week. I just think it's a really useful thing to know, basically. Actually, my sister told me about it. I mean, I've studied it a little bit as a counselor, but I feel like it's a really useful thing to know. And I think in the context of Dharma, it's also really useful. So, yeah, what is the shadow side? What is our shadow side? Have you ever found yourself repeating a bad experience or choosing some, finding yourself in a relationship, but it's the same kind of person, the same problem manifesting again and again in your life? And you're like, what did I do? Why am I here again? Why am I making the same mistake, repeating the same experiences again and again? And how can I get out of this vicious cycle, right? When we find ourselves repeating the same pattern in life, meeting the same avoidant partners or the same bullying authority figures, trauma could be guiding us. Until we make the unconscious conscious, it could guide our lives in a way, and we will call it fate. This is the shadow side of ourselves that we've suppressed, that we've made unconscious. Or it could be conditioning from childhood, trauma from childhood, ways that we got love and established patterns with our parents to survive. And maybe as we've got older, as we've got busy, we've pushed it aside. But if we don't make it conscious, it's guiding our life, basically. A lot of our unconscious tendencies and so forth. And what I found really moving and beautiful about what my sister told me was, she said, sometimes we create the same circumstances again in our life. I'm not saying that everything that happens to you is your fault or that you attracted it, but I'm just saying how conditioning can make us seek out certain things, right? When we've gone through something traumatic, or we've lost something, or we've had a heartbreaking issue we can't resolve, we sometimes try to repeat the circumstances with different people or environments so that we can have a better outcome. And I thought that is so poignant, and, imagine like there's someone you really love and they cheated on you. And so then you go looking for love, the next partner, but you're looking for the same kind of partner because you've got unresolved issues, things, maybe this time if I can, even though they're an avoidant attachment, if I can just love them enough, or if I can help them heal, that you'll get resolution, you'll get wholeness, you'll get closure. Or we lost a child, so we're mothering people. Or maybe it's what we were told about ourselves as a child, like, oh, you're so needy, or you're so, you're such a loser, or I don't, maybe it's a part of yourself you feel ashamed of, so you always have to, you can't really fully open up with someone you love because you were told certain parts of yourself were unacceptable, like the angry part, or to ask for what you desire, to experiment. To think that we go through our lives hiding really significant parts of ourselves is really sad, actually. Yes, and what we don't make conscious can manifest in, and that's why human relationships can sometimes be so messy, because we are only seeing the top of the iceberg of what's going on for someone underneath. But there's all these things, all these unconscious things, like we can really, and this happens in Dharma centers and in monasteries. Like we think, why is there abuse? How can good people do bad things? Because we're all carrying around the burden of these unresolved issues and trauma that we play out with each other, basically. So Yeah. Sometimes we repeat the same scenario. Yeah. Hoping for a better outcome. The disowned or hidden parts of ourselves can lead to self-sabotage or behavioral issues. It's called repetition compulsion. We enact our emotional wounds. You know, it could be unhealthy. And, you know, sometimes we choose, like we might choose someone who is actually emotionally unavailable because the idea that someone actually wants us or is too emotionally available is scary to us. Or if we've grown up with an unhealthy kind of relationship where nothing felt safe, if someone's emotionally available, that can feel boring. Or, you know, we're growing up with flight or fight, so we go towards what feels familiar. Whereas the unknown healthy choice can feel a little scary, can feel unfamiliar. We accept the love we think we deserve. But there is a way to bring the shadow side, bring up these issues, feel these feelings, face the discomfort, face and unpack the trauma, and then make better choices. But you can only make better choices when you've addressed the pattern and you know what's driving it. And we're talking, this shadow work, I guess, is probably good to do, you know, maybe with a therapist. But it's not okay, one day and I'm done. It's a lifetime practice, I think. So follow the clues. What are the clues? I mean, some people listening might think, well, this really sounds like psychology, not just Buddhism. But in meditation, you're looking at your own mind and you're seeing what's arising, and you're seeing the breadcrumb trail to, how have I tied myself in a knot? How have I misapprehended the nature of my mind and created a whole storyline about the world and how things are? How have I trapped myself here, basically? You're unraveling delusion. You know, it's not that different, actually. But just, I think psychology is more like the top layer of, whereas Buddhism, I think Buddhism goes deeper, actually. But that doesn't mean that Buddhists don't need emotional healing and often need, especially people in communities, they don't need psychology. I think psychology could be very useful because I've seen some very dysfunctional communities. And I know I have trauma. I haven't had an easy life. We all do. Most of us. So follow the signs. Like, where do you feel powerless, resentful, defensive, reactive? This shows, you know, or your reaction is way more than what triggered it. You know, like someone saying something offhand, off the cuff. They didn't really mean anything bad, but you're so triggered by that. You're so angry or you're so offended. And the reaction is more intense than the reaction far outweighs the comment. You know the shadow has been triggered, the unresolved issue has been triggered. So when you're reactive, you know, what do you hope to gain? What safety are you trying to find by repeating this behavior? It can be useful to journal or observe relationship patterns and internal dialogues. And don't shame the disowned parts of yourself, but acknowledge feelings of unmet childhood needs and accept change. Once you accept and acknowledge and change, then you can change the conscious response. But if we avoid uncomfortable feelings, they live in our unconscious and they run our life. I think part of why some men are so obsessed with controlling women, wanting them to be submissive, wanting them to be beautiful, needing women to pay attention to them, is because they have externalized the locus of their control. When they can control the woman, they feel emotionally regulated. In Jungian psychology, that is what we would call an immature. Well, I'm not getting the terminology right, but we're not talking about the mature masculine. We're talking about the immature masculine that needs to externalize the locus of their emotional control and regulation. You could see in that show called Adolescence, where a child, a young boy who has been exposed to some toxic masculinity, ends up committing great violence to a girl who teases him. You could see in that family, in that boy's family, the mother and daughter were emotionally regulating the father. He wasn't fully conscious of, Anyway, unfortunately, a lot of the mental health issues some men have is because the patriarchal rites of passage for young men can be really brutal. And if you show vulnerability or emotion, you get ridiculed, bullied, face violence. So it's not completely men's fault. They actually women face violence, secondary violence at the hands of patriarchy, but the first victims of patriarchy are men's psyche, well-being, cutting off from their own hearts, basically, cutting off your own emotions. So the rage that we see in some young men, the need to control women, the bitterness, the mental health issues. It seems I've seen so many middle-aged men having so many health issues, so much depression, because all of these feelings, the shadow self has been repressed for so long, and I really do feel for men, and I want men to thrive. And I'm tired of the violence that women and children face from men who've been told to suppress their feelings, or that other people are responsible for their feelings, and for placating their rage. Of course, you're going to feel rage when anger is the only socially acceptable outlet for men. They can express rage and they can express lust, but anything else is weak and, don't be a girl. But men have the same emotions as women. They might express them differently. They might not always understand them, but they're there, and knowing that and developing emotional intelligence and emotional literacy and learning to regulate yourself is fundamental work to be a healthy, happy human being, to be a good friend, a good partner, a good parent, a safe person. We all need that. We all need to learn emotional literacy to take care of ourselves, basically. And this is part of mindfulness practice, breathing in, I know I am angry. Breathing out, maybe I need to not speak and I need to go to the source of this pain. Return to myself so that I don't destroy my marriage, destroy my loved one, destroy my child, enact my rage and my shame and my critiquing, my unfair critiquing on others. I need to go back to myself and discover the roots of this pain. Yeah. So don't shame the disowned parts of yourself. Acknowledge feelings from unmet childhood needs. Yeah. Accept and change. This is a process of, months, years. Yeah. Of course, we all have an outer mask that hides our imperfections. The things we idolize in others could also be buried in our shadow. It's not just all ugly stuff, anger and rage and jealousy. It could also be joy, because you're cut off. If all your, I think part of the longing for the obsession with sex with some people is actually a longing for intimacy, a longing for love. You know, isn't it sad that men can't just hug each other and, you know, oh, that means you're gay, or there's so much fear around expressing, you know, affection and friendship, or that you're going to be violated, you know, that longing for connection and intimacy becomes an obsession with controlling someone, or, you know, controlling bodies, possessing bodies, instead of actual emotional connection. And that has to start with yourself, you know, and then humanizing others and valuing their feelings, valuing their pleasure, valuing their whole being, you know. No wonder, you know, intimacy has become something younger people aren't even doing anymore. You know, we're so lonely. And even like, because sex has been commodified with pornography, and it's become something so numb, so joyless, because there isn't any emotional intimacy there. Whereas if we had friendships with deep emotional intimacy and healthy boundaries, maybe we would also have more deep and loving relationships, you know, romantic relationships. Our talents, the parts of ourselves, our deepest longing, you know, our sense of humor could be buried in our unconscious as well, because maybe we had a highly critical parent, or there are just parts of our self we put away because our desire for acceptance was stronger than our need to be authentic. But as you get older, the things you buried start to weigh on you, you know. In the shadow can also be unresolved conflicts and problem, you know, pain, unmet needs and wishes, socially unacceptable behavior. I'm not saying you should just do whatever you want and at other people's expense. I'm talking about unpacking these things in a safe container, you know. And if you know you have a lot of trauma, a lot of things that you buried, therapy could be a really good idea. But I also know not everyone can afford therapy. Maybe group therapy, and also maybe following some psychotherapists online, reading some books. So, yeah. I mean, it often comes from childhood, how we get love and nurture. And if we don't get, as children, if we don't get love and nurturing and acceptance, we'll die. So it's very fundamental. Yeah, our fear of abandonment is significant. The shadow is our wounded self, you know. So doing shadow work is also about meeting ourselves. And if so much of your emotions and yourself is tied up in, you've suppressed it, that's an aliveness that is blocked, you know, blocked away. So sometimes depression can be all of our energy is blocked and stagnating. It's not flowing because it's locked up in shame and trauma, and we've buried it, you know? Yeah. Sometimes another sign of unresolved shadow can be, you know, projecting it onto others, being very judgmental of others. Hello, Pauline Hanson. Yeah, it can also be, you know, being very critical of the environment, the family, you know. It can also manifest as jealousy, addiction, codependence, self-sabotage, procrastination, abuse, guilt, and shame. Yeah, and we can't heal what we don't acknowledge and what we can't see. Yeah. So ways to make the unconscious conscious, you know, who do you like and not like? Who do you judge? Who do you want to be like? What do you dream of that you want to achieve? What thought patterns do you have that might stop you from achieving those things? I mean, it's really powerful when we tell ourselves, or if we've been told by a parent, you know, you're dumb, you could never possibly achieve those things, you could never go back to school, it's not practical. Or like if you were raised by parents, maybe really poor people, you know, like you might have a mentality of like, I don't want to be part of the system, or, you know, you might have some self-limiting beliefs. Not to say that everything is possible for everyone and that systems of oppression aren't real and racism isn't real. Those things are things people have to contend with. You know, if you're born in a very low socioeconomic situation, difficult, you know, and you're in survival mode and you have to take on a job, you can't afford to go to college, those are significant setbacks. I know in my early life, you know, I was homeless and I had a lot of loss and challenges, trauma that I had to face that maybe stopped me from like going to university or so-called living a normal life. But I think in my case, I'm only speaking about my case, sometimes those obstacles can become food for awakening too, fuel for awakening. But some people just have a lot of trauma and it's really unfortunate and it kills them and it's really sad. Yes, so that is, how are we going for time? Oh, been talking an hour. That is, this is just brief, okay? Obviously, this is just a little entree about the shadow and how we sometimes find ourselves repeating things to try and resolve them, you know, but it's something to, or we repeat a dynamic we saw, like we either choose a partner that is the same or the opposite of our mother or father. And we repeat things because we want to resolve something that didn't get resolved in the past, you know. But when you're aware, this is what I'm doing, I've been down that road and I don't need to go down that road again, because I know no matter how much I break myself on the rock of an apathetic, emotionally unavailable partner, it's not going to change, you know. And I'm not going to get self-acceptance by being with someone. I have to give myself the acceptance, isn't it? You know, of course, this is, I'm in danger of falling into a cliche here, but it's always much more nuanced and complex than this. And how does this apply to the Dharma? Our friend mentioned, you know, how there is inequality, there's patriarchy, there's abuse, and that a lot of Buddhists tend to not want to acknowledge those things. Like people just want a nun to be peaceful and happy, right? Why is this nun online talking about abuse and patriarchy and how she can't survive? Why doesn't she just go away and be quiet and meditate? Nuns should go away sometimes and be quiet and meditate. But if they have nowhere to live, if they have no training, if they have no support, it's hard to do that. And also maybe they start to hate themselves because they see the monks just being ordained and immediately becoming teachers and praised and really well supported, and they're in the kitchen, never able to take full ordination, never able to get a proper education, and they just start praying to be reborn as a man. I've met nuns like this. I was told to pray to be reborn as a man by a Tibetan Lama who absolutely meant well. He was like, he really meant well, you know. You've got bad karma as a woman and you need to pray to be reborn as a man. Like the Tibetan word for woman is low-born, kyemen. Not to say that all Tibetans these days believe that, or that there aren't accomplished female saints in Tibetan Buddhism, or that all lamas are misogynist. That's not true. But I think we have to understand and face the reality that these shadows are there. I mean, if you take a little boy away from his mother at 8 years old, how is he going to view women? He's going to view women as secret and forbidden. So he's probably going to have you're setting him up. I'm not saying this happens widely, but it definitely happens to some, to have a secret affair, because women are secret and women are forbidden. And I lost my mother at a young age. So everything I'm looking for is in this secret affair. And I'm trying to get an unmet need for emotional intimacy and care, the love that I was deprived of from my mother, something like that, So these unmet needs manifest in ways that have devastating consequences for sanghas and abuse, because someone who's acting out this kind of behavior, this kind of abuse of women, like, he can be talking about compassion on the throne, but he'll be living a double life in the bedroom. And the way he won't acknowledge his relationship or his need for a relationship, or acknowledge or humanize his female disciples and understand their experience and acknowledge their experience, that being denigrated, being marginalized, not having full ordination, not having their potential acknowledged, not having women in the lineage prayer, in the refuge tree, can have detrimental consequences for women, because they don't see themselves as, if all the hero stories about men, there's no hero stories about women. It conditions how you see yourself, I mean, we rehearse little kids for the life they're going to have. We give little girls dolls and we say, care for the doll. And we give little boys trucks and we say, build stuff, be strong, save the world. And we give them a little soldier, drive a fast car, live an exciting life. And little girls were like, take care of this baby, hug this teddy. You know what I mean? Or we tell them stories about women being helpless and men saving them. So I think the shadow is a really important reflection for Buddhist communities. And if we don't acknowledge the psychology behind these wounds, they're going to manifest in community. Because Buddhist spiritual communities are just a reflection of the greater society. So it's not that, because people are celibate, they're sexually perverse and it creates pedophiles. It's, because religious communities are a microcosm of the larger society. There's the same amount of pedophilia going on I think they did this survey with priests. There's as many pedophile priests as there are pedophile men in wider society, although all we seem to hear about is pedophile priests. Of course, a pedophile might be attracted to a religious environment or the scouts or some place in the community where he or she has access to children. And I'm not, it's horrible and it needs to be stopped. And we need to be aware of keeping children, everybody, safe in spiritual communities. But if we don't acknowledge these things, and our psychological issues and our trauma, or the way that we seek approval from the father figure of the Lama, we create the family we never had, and then we get into groupthink and we let the Lama do appalling things because we're so broken down and brainwashed by occult mentality. So people think that only stupid people get involved in cults. But actually the operation of the cult leader, the potential, often a narcissist, they'll observe you and they'll see, where is this person's weaknesses? What is their psychic wounding? Oh, their father abandoned them. Oh, their partner died. Oh, they're looking for meaning and belonging. You know, these communities, spiritual teachings, spiritual teachers and communities offer good things. But when it's a cult, it becomes about controlling you, manipulating you, and giving you conditional love. But you need to give us free labor, blind submission, and basically the cult operation is to separate you from your logic and your intuition and your boundaries, so that you'll then bring in other people and sometimes do unspeakable acts, you know, in the name of liberation or going beyond karma or crazy wisdom or whatever. Yeah. So without this self-knowledge of our own emotions and our own psychology, we can be manipulated. Yeah. This is why we absolutely need to understand the shadow and make the unconscious conscious. So has anyone else written any questions? If you get a deflected experience of aversion following a Buddhist teacher, is that something to trust with devotion? Do we endeavor to follow the Guru, especially? Oh my God, this is a long, sorry. A deflected experience of aversion. If you've had previous past confusion or trauma in one experiences with Buddha, Dharma, and Sangha, is it therefore more important to trust in oneself, a slower, more steady sureness with oneself and karma and livelihood, not hope to transform into something more directly profound immediately? I mean, if a teacher makes you uncomfortable or brings up aversion, especially, just understand, if it's a cult in the beginning, they're going to love bomb you. They're going to bring you in and they're going to make you feel great. So if if they're not very charismatic and they're a little bit rough, that's probably a good sign in the beginning. But if they have no compassion and they're abusive, that's not good. I think it's good to trust in oneself, but I think also, you know, we can be aware that sometimes we can be carrying past trauma into present relationships as well. Maybe it's good to look at and educate yourself around green flags and red flags in cults and so forth. The guru-student relationship, you're supposed to examine, okay, do they have an unbroken lineage? Do they have compassion? Do they have Vajrayana vows? Do they have realization? But most important is compassion. Are they hypocritical? Do they keep the vows they have if they're a monk? Not all lamas are monks. But you should examine them for about 2 years before you take an initiation from them. So that hopefully should give you time. And of course, if it's just some big lama, there is a website called Difficult Issues in Buddhism, and it lists like lots of teachers that have some questionable, maybe have been accused of something, and it's not just baseless accusations. It's there's a bit of investigation being done, so you can check out a lama there. You know, you can just Google them and see if there's any articles about them as well. You know, if they seem grandiose and they're surrounded by you know, like they're surrounded by a harem of women, They're like, uh, there's a lot of ego and charisma there. It's probably good to avoid, you know. Um, it's not always the ones with the biggest followers or really flashy. You know, that's not always not always a sign of being a great Lama. It's good to check in with yourself and your gut and how you feel, for sure. And it's also important to know the teachings and read the sutras directly, the words of the Buddha, the practices, understand the teachings and how it's supposed to work, you know, because ultimately it's your own practice. The guru is your own mind, and it's the practice that liberates you. But having a proper guru that you've examined for a good period of time can be really powerful. It's just a real shame that there's lots of wolf in sheep's, how you say? Wolf in sheep's clothing too. So be very, very careful. Yeah. In Mahayana, for example, there is the spiritual friend, you know, and they don't have as much control as the guru. So it's a little bit more of a safe relationship. So that might be more something to enter into in the beginning, like an older practitioner who's just a bit ahead of the path than you are. That kind of relationship can be a good place to start instead of like just diving into some guru-student relationship, which is much more fraught and much more risky. You know, take your time. Yeah. Okay. I'm just looking through to see any other questions. Okay. Is there any other questions? I think. Yeah. So there's a lot going on in the world, isn't there? Yeah, I think also just with what's going on in the world, you know, the challenging times we're living in, don't give in to despair. You're not helping anyone. There is not great things on the horizon, and I think it's okay to be realistic about the fact that climate change is going to lead to food insecurity and maybe eventually the failure of government systems. It's hard to say when, you know, when that would happen, but a lot of wars and famine and instability and, you know, countries closing their borders and aggression. But do we want to be part of the problem or part of the solution? You know, do we want to create local networks of hope and resilience, and continue our practice and our community building despite and because of the darkness growing around us, you know, and being part of lighting a lamp in a dark place instead of giving into despair and fear and chaos. You know, even if things don't turn out well, we can say that we held the line and that we stood for humanity and goodness and justice and good things till the end. Who can say what will happen, you know? But we should support young people, you know, because they're really the ones who are going to get the worst of the onslaught of climate change. Yeah. And if there is ways, you know, that you could rent out a spare room in your house or offer emotional support to the growing darkness and anxiety and financial insecurity that young people face, I think it would be good. Of course, there's all kinds of people who need help, you know, disabled people, people of color. Yeah, there's just so many, and you have to choose according to what really appeals to your sense of justice. You know, maybe just volunteering once a month at a local soup kitchen. I think it's so sad that in a country as wealthy as Australia or, you know, America, that we have tent cities popping up just because the government can't be bothered in building affordable housing, or they won't sanction tiny houses because it blocks someone's view of the ocean or something like that. They'd rather criminalize homelessness than have affordable housing. It's just a failure of humanity, actually. But anyway, we can do what we can do. Yeah. So may all beings, by the merit of this practice, may all beings find peace and happiness. And may the Dharma thrive, and may all beings have an end to war. And may people think of benefiting each other. May they quickly realize the luminous nature of their own mind. So, and may you be happy. So just so you know, this Sunday at 2:00, I have a online sequential, if you want to grow your Dharma practice, we have a class every 2 or 3 weeks. This Sunday at 2 p.m. there is a class at Sydney time, Australia. There is a WhatsApp group and a class on Zoom. You can direct message me on Facebook or email me at moon, like moon in the sky, Dakini, DAKINI @hotmail.com. If you want to get the link for this ongoing community. If you can donate $20, I would appreciate it. You can donate, I'll put the details at the end of this talk. But if you're in India, if you don't have the money, that's okay. Just private message me and say, I don't have the money, but can I be included in your online community? But the rules are you keep your video on and you're not doing something else while I'm giving a Dharma talk. Yeah, so there is a retreat in October, the first weekend of October in my monastery in Tasmania. So if you're interested in that, let me know. There's still places for that. We really need support. If you want to support a child in India, I run a charity in India called Bodhicitta Foundation. It's tax deductible. You could change your life that way. I'm doing a tour of India at the end of January for 10 days. We're going to all the holy places of Buddhism, like Bodh Gaya, Sarnath, where the Buddha first taught, like that's Varanasi, but Lumbini, where he passed away in Nepal, and a few other beautiful, like Vaishali, and some beautiful old stupas. So if you're interested in that, you can also email me or direct message me. Okay, thank you for coming. May you be happy and well. And maybe I'll see you on Sunday, or maybe I'll see you next time I do a Ask Me Anything, maybe in 2 weeks or 3 weeks. May you be happy. Thank you so much.